Connectra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative, our Tuesday Community Support Group, where space is provided to share your personal journey with disability or simply listen to others in a safe and inclusive environment. Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski. Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson. Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff. Additionally, starting in April, we're bringing back our Wednesday creative writing classes, running from 2 to 3 p.m. and hosted by Emily Gillespie. And other initiatives, including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's GrowABLE program, and our Perspective series. Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at Connectra Society. The Abilities Expo is back in 2022. The Abilities Expo is Connectra Society's flagship event, bringing together exhibitors, vendors, resources, guest speakers, and more to further enrich the disability community's well-being and connectedness. Join us on May 25th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Roundhouse Community Centre in Vancouver, BC, to reconnect with your community in person. Tickets are available now at connectra.org/abilitiesexpo.
Shall I go ahead and get started here, folks? What do we think?
Yes, please.
All righty. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen there. Would love to just quickly check in, Terry and Elizabeth. Did the seedling mix grow lights arrive for the two of you? Have you been able to put them to use? Maybe give me the quick little update if you don't mind.
For me, I finally got a setup to for the lights where I could extend them and a table. But I don't have the seedling tray, you know, with the little greenhouse cover.
Okay.
Big piece of plastic instead. So
okay.
Work.
All righty. And how about you, Elizabeth?
Mine's arrived, but I haven't. I'm going to set it up. I haven't set it up yet, but I'm going to do it.
All righty. Perfect. Well, you two will have to keep me posted as we go through the spring and into summer here. And as always, if you have any questions on it at any time, just like drop me a note, be able to help you out, make sure we get those babies growing. But what we're going to be focusing on today is really all about kind of getting them into the garden. And that's the hardening off process and then transplanting them, you know, the process of actually putting them into the garden. And, you know, the beauty of this is that it's like perfectly in time for normally right around now. This is right around kind of like late April, early May, mid-May that we would be doing a lot of our hardening off and transplanting. But this year has been like unseasonably chilly, super, super, super cold. So there really is not any rush to be starting this today, tomorrow, anything along those lines. You know, I was hoping to be transplanting a lot of things, you know, kind of like my leafy greens, my kales, etc. in April here, like late April, but I've hung tight on it just because I know that it's not going to kind of help the plants out at all. And so I'm kind of eyeballing beginning of May at this point for those cooler weather crops. But even that, I'm not overly optimistic that's going to happen right then and there. So no rush on this front, but nonetheless, good timing to be going through it so you have all the information on hand, because it is going to be happening over the course of the coming 3 to 4 weeks here. And so for our session, I want to break it down into 3 kind of key chunks. First, we're going to talk about like, why does this hardening off process matter? Then we're going to go through the 7-day hardening off process that I utilize and have utilized to ensure that every single one of my seedlings has successfully transplanted into the garden. And then we're going to wrap up with that 3rd piece, which is the actual just kind of steps that we want to take for transplanting. So why does this hardening off thing matter so much? And what exactly is it? Well, at a high level, it's introducing our plants to the intensity and variability that they're going to be experiencing outdoors. And so what exactly do I mean by that? Well, when we think about the temperature that our seedlings have been growing in, if we started seeds indoors, it's probably been in and around 20 Celsius, 70, 71 Fahrenheit. And that's like a really nice and comfortable environment to be in. And if we are buying seedlings, they're going to have been in something that's been very similar to this. But when we move them outside into our garden, right now the lows are still getting all the way down to 5 Celsius. And there's absolutely the possibility that even as we get later into the season, that could still occur. But on top of that, those highs, like when the sun does come out, it really does start to heat up the garden all the way to in excess of 30 Celsius. And then when we think about the light that they've been receiving, right now it's been under grow lights, just like the ones that the 2 of you have there. And once we move them outside, that's going to now be into the sun and getting those UV sun rays. And the grow lights that we utilize are really good and strong. We're getting anywhere from 7,000 to probably about 20,000 lumens, depending on how close the plant is to them. Once we move outside though, the sun, 76,000 lumens. So it's a whole other world of intensity that those plants are going to be facing once they get out there. Same thing on the wind front. Maybe we've been utilizing a little oscillating fan inside, or again, if we bought them from a nursery, there's been maybe a little bit of air flowing through there. Once we get outside, I've got some videos I'm going to be showing you today where there've been just like huge gale force winds rolling through my backyard that we need to get our babies ready for. And lastly is on the moisture front. We've been giving them like the most gentle little 1 turkey base of water right at the plant. And now when we get them outside, they're going to get those Pacific Northwest rains on them for multiple days in a row. But then simultaneously, they're going to get days in a row of no moisture whatsoever and just complete kind of drought conditions. So again, that's that variability element. And so if there's one thing that I want you to kind of take from the hardening off process and what exactly it is, it's that it is the incremental preparation of our plant babies for that variability and intensity of the outdoors. When we think about it, even just like for ourselves, if we were to go on vacation somewhere nice and warm, and if we were to go all of a sudden go day 1, we're going to spend 12 hours on the beach, we're going to be scorched. We're going to be absolutely burnt. We're going to be exhausted. We're going to be drained, all of that. But if we go out there for maybe 2 hours on that first day and then 4 hours, 6 hours, we're acclimatizing to that new environment. And we want our plant babies to have that same opportunity. So the question then really becomes like, when do I get started on this? When is it warm enough for our plant babies to be moving into the garden beds? And so for our cool weather crops, these being things like our kale, our peas, onions, cabbage, broccoli, etc., we're looking for the nighttime low to be at least 8 Celsius. And then for our warmer weather crops, such as our tomatoes, our peppers, squashes, zucchinis, we want it to be even a little bit warmer, a minimum of 10 Celsius. Now, I know what you might be thinking on this front, and that is that, it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. I want to go a little bit earlier. I want to go when it's 4 Celsius or 5 Celsius. And so this is like one of the most kind of, I guess, common feelings as a gardener, is that like kind of antsiness to get things into the garden. And I get it, because I'm like right there and wanting to do the same thing. But I was really curious this year in terms of, okay, if I were to push it really early, how are the plants going to do? And so what I decided to do was start hardening some plant babies off. And like the very next day, there's a huge hailstorm that rolls through. So they were not very happy with me on that. And then on April 2nd, what I decided to do was actually transplant a few of my tomatoes. So I hardened these off. I got these into the garden on April 2nd, and I really babied them. I gave them a leaf mulch. I then put down landscape fabric over top to keep and kind of draw in some warmth. And then the final piece was that I utilized a DIY greenhouse over top of them to kind of ensure that they have as much warm air staying right in and around them as possible. So April 2nd, babies are into the garden. Now we have had not the warmest April by any stretch of the imagination. How are they looking a couple of weeks later? Not so good. So April 13th, and I was literally just out there today, kind of like another 12 days later or 10 days later or so. And they're in worse condition at this point. They're even more yellow, even more just kind of like on the brink, trying to survive. And what's, I think, even more important to take from this is that maybe the plant will survive. Maybe it will like make it to kind of early mid-May where it'll start hopefully recovering a little bit. But I don't know yet. Like the verdict is absolutely still out there. The bigger thing from my perspective is that since transplanting them on April 2nd, they have not put on like not a literal speck of growth. So they have just sat zero growth, trying to survive for about now 3-4 weeks. And at the same time, I started some seedlings on the exact same day, but I kept them inside in that warm environment underneath the grow light. And they're thriving. They have flowers on them. They've got fruit on them. They're growing. They look so happy. And so it's kind of one of these things where it's like you can go really early if you want. The risks that you're going to run are like, yeah, they could actually end up dying. But the bigger one is just like, we're going to kind of stunt the plant, and then it's going to try to go through a recovery period. And so my encouragement on that front is to really try to exercise a level of patience and learn from those observations that I've had from transplanting super, super early on, that like, I just haven't gained anything. I'm not further ahead in the season at all. Those plants, if anything, are hopefully going to survive and then have to go through like a recovery stretch before ultimately thriving once again. So really, really interesting kind of just going through that over the last little bit. And the good news, I was just looking at the weather app, that warmth is on the horizon. I'm starting to see some days in like the high teens as we get closer to the beginning of May. So what that means is that we do want to begin our hardening off process as we get towards May and of course throughout May. And the way that I love to go about this is with a 7-day process. Because again, we don't want to go out to the beach and be out there 12 hours over the course of the day. We want to gradually and incrementally acclimatize to that new environment. And so the way that we're going to go about this is that on day number 1 here, what we want to do is we want to move our plant babies outside so that they are exposed to those elements for 2 hours on the day. So at some point, it could be morning, afternoon. All that we're doing is grabbing our plant babies and we're bringing them outside. And now, as you can see, I am putting them into direct sunlight. So I am not putting them into a shaded area. I want them in the sun because I'm only going to have them in that sunny spot for 2 hours. That's more gradual than not leaving them in the sun and bringing them outside for 2 hours, 4 hours. And then all of a sudden, like on day 3, bringing them outside for 6 hours and putting them into the sun. That would be a more intense experience for them to be growing through. So day 1, 2 hours. What happens at the end of those 2 hours? We just simply pick up our tray of seedlings and we bring them back inside. We put them underneath our grow light stand or into a windowsill, and we allow them to continue to hang out for the remainder of the day. Now, so for myself, I do lots of stuff with grow lights. I have my grow lights on a 13-hour timer, so they turn on at 7:30 in the morning and off at 8:30 at night. Basically that timer I don't touch. So the grow light stays on for the 2 hours that they're outside. And then I just slide them right back underneath. And maybe they have another 5, 6, 7 hours of growing underneath that grow light. So I don't make any changes on that front. Alrighty, day 1 done and dusted. On to day 2 here. And we're going to move our babies outside for 4 hours on this day. But what you can also see is I have my raincoat on. So again, we want to be introducing them to that intensity, that variability. On day 1 there, they got to see the sun. On day 2 here, they're going to see the rains that they're going to be experiencing. Now, on this particular day, it wasn't actually raining where I live. And so the question then becomes, how do we maybe simulate that a little bit? And so all that I did was I grabbed my basically tap, turned it on, grabbed my sprayer, turned it to the shower setting, and I am giving them a really big drink of water here. So don't be afraid to really, kind of like be spraying all the leaves somewhat close. You want to see them rustling around. All of that is basically just preparing them once again for the rains that they're going to be experiencing over the course of the season. So those babies got a really good drink of water, and they got it kind of smacked right on them opposed to just at the root system. So again, I'm happy with getting them introduced to those elements. Then after those 4 hours, I just grab them, pop them back inside, allow them to recover a little bit here, and they're going to hang out underneath the grow light for the remainder of the day. Let's continue along. Day 3, what are we doing? We're taking our next step on this journey. We're going up to 6 hours. And you can see this day, I am all bundled up. I got my warm clothes on because it was a little bit blustery out there. Those gale force winds that I alluded to, they're coming through. So on this day, we are putting our plant babies onto that exact same bed. And I want to introduce them to the wind. But it wasn't windy on that day where I live. So I'm thinking through, how do I go about potentially simulating that wind just like this that they're going to be experiencing at different points? How do I make that come to life? Well, I go into my shed, find one of my little tools, grab this baby here, my leaf blower, pop the battery in, and give them a big gust of air here. So as we can see, they are looking just like those trees that we saw a second ago, fully getting blown over and experiencing all of that intensity. Now, do you need to go to Home Depot, Canadian Tire, and buy a leaf blower just for the hardening off process? Absolutely not. This is me just being typical me, a little bit silly, and having a little bit of fun with it. But it does articulate that point that introducing them to that intensity, to that variability is exactly what we want to be doing right now. So if you do have a day that's really hot, or you do have a day that's really rainy, or you do have a day that's really windy, don't be afraid to leave them out there, because those are the elements that we want to be introducing them to. And as you can see, even when I artificially simulate them with a leaf blower and with my hose spraying right on top of them, the plant does well still. It's toughening up. It's getting used to this environment. So after 6 hours, I'm bringing those babies back inside here underneath the grow light, allowing them to recover from that little windstorm that they went through there. Alrighty, so day 3 is done. We've got 7 days that we're going through. Day 4 and 5, super straightforward. So on these 2 days, we're just continuing to up the time. Nothing else changes. Day 4, we bring them out for 10 hours and then bring them back inside. And then for day number 5, we bring them outside for 12 hours and then we bring them back inside underneath the grow light. And on these days, you might notice some wilting on your plants where they're looking a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued. That's a lot of time for them to be spending in the sun. And know that that is 100% natural to be seeing. So if you notice that the leaves are kind of wilting over a little bit, they're feeling a little bit kind of just like not as full of life as they normally would be, totally normal. The one thing that you do want to do at this time is basically just check the soil to make sure that there's some moisture in there. So you want to dig down kind of like 1 to 2 inches and just kind of get a bit of a feel for is there moisture still in there or is it bone dry? If it's bone dry, definitely give it a nice big drink of water. But if there's moisture in there, they're going to be a-okay. They're going to rebound overnight. This is once again exactly what we actually want to be seeing from them because we're introducing them to that intensity and variability. Alrighty, so we have made it to the end of day 5. Plant babies are inside, on to day 6. And day 6 is the first time that we're going to leave them outside overnight. So in the morning, we bring them outside and we put them into that exact same area. Now later that day, sun sets, we can see the plant baby there, and it is staying out there over the evening. And this is always a little bit nerve-wracking for me because I'm like, I hope the babies will be okay. So how'd they do? Oh no.
You didn't really think
I was
they'd
out
be
there
able to
camping with
spend their
them.
first night out in the garden all on their own, did you? No, I'll be camped out here the whole night with them, making sure they're okay. Just wish I could give them my toque.
So I'm out there camping out with them, making sure they're a-okay. I didn't actually sleep out there, don't worry, but everything for a good piece of content, right? Next morning,
Okay.
how are they doing?
Let's see how our babies did.
And check it out.
Looking pretty good.
So about 7 in the morning, and they're looking happy. You know, they've made it through the evening. They now have been exposed to that cold temperature as well, right? So we think about, again, those elements that we're exposing to. First, it was the sun. Then it was the rain. Then it was the wind. The last big one was really the cold temperatures that we see at that nighttime low. And by being patient with it and ultimately doing this over a multi-day process opposed to all at once, our babies, they're really, really happy. They're doing well. So day 6 has come to a close. I wake up there on day 7, and day 7, we don't change anything. This is just kind of like a buffer day where let's leave them outside for another night in their seed cell before we transplant them, just to observe the plant and make sure that it is all good for then ultimately transplanting into the bed. So you then get to day 7, or sorry, it'd now be day 8 in the morning. And day 8 really is like the beginning of our transplanting window. And so if you want, you can transplant them into the beds on day 8 there. But the one thing, or I guess there's a couple things that you want to do before you just kind of dive straight into transplanting. The first one is that you want to check the weather. So just double check that there is not any cold snap on the horizon. You know, if I was looking at this and I saw that on May 1st, there's going to be a low of 3, but then it kind of shoots back up to 6, 7, perfect. I would be waiting, right? Like if this was day 8 here on May 2nd, I would just bring them back inside on day 8 there. And then on day 9, which would end up being Monday, May 3rd, I would transplant them on that day where it's just a little bit warmer so that they don't have to go outside through that cold snap as they begin their time out in the garden. Now, the one last thing that we need to do before we do transplant them into the garden, and this is, I don't know, maybe 10 times more important than double checking the weather. Oh, sorry, I missed a couple here. Let me backtrack there. A couple other less important pieces. And that is just kind of like having a close eye on that temperature in the garden. So min-max thermometer there, you can utilize this to basically see what the minimum temperature is in your garden. So there's 3 dials in there, a black dial, a red dial, and a blue dial. And the black dial is the actual current temperature. And so as the day heats up, it's pushing the red dial to the hottest point of the day. And then the red dial sits there until you reset it back to 0. And then it takes the, or kind of as the day cools down, it then starts pushing the blue dial to the coolest point in the day. And so now, rather than just going off of your weather app or your kind of like local weather website, what you can do is you can actually have a min-max thermometer in your bed and see, okay, when the weather app says that it's going to be 6 Celsius as the low, I know just based on the little microclimate that I'm in and by using my min-max thermometer that it's generally 1 to 2 degrees warmer. So I've got a little bit more leeway there. Really, really cool tool to be kind of understanding your microclimate that you're growing in. And then the other piece that's like really, really valuable are these DIY greenhouses. And so what they're doing is that like as the sun hits them during the daytime, the air inside can't escape. So it begins to warm up and get really, really warm in there during the daytime. And so I was really curious, does it actually help at all at nighttime? Because there's no insulation on it or anything. And so using the min-max thermometer, you can actually see it there in the bottom corner there. I had that inside and I tracked the temperature every single day for about a 2-week period. And what I found was just by having all that heat going in there over the course of the day, it ends up even at nighttime, keeping it about 3 Celsius warmer than just being fully exposed in the backyard. And that's like a really big buffer, because if we're utilizing those and we're keeping our eyes peeled for that 8 Celsius day, even if there is a cold snap that brings it down to like say 5 Celsius or 4 Celsius, by having that over top of it, our plant babies have that little extra bit of protection and ultimately is going to help them thrive from the get-go. And there's a really cool little hack on this front that you can literally grab like a storage tote from a big box store. And then you can see I drilled some holes in the top of it here to let a little bit of that hot air out. And then all that it's going to do is basically that exact same type of greenhouse effect, but much smaller, much quicker and easier to set up and get all situated in the garden. And then if it ever gets too hot, you can just simply pop that off. So those I am a really, really big fan of. I've got a whole bunch of them all kind of like scattered throughout my yard and really love them for these kind of early months of the season when we're doing some of that transplanting. Now, that one piece that I mentioned that is 10 times more important than any of these pieces when it comes to transplanting and really making sure that our babies have a successful transition into the garden is our graduation photo. So I am expecting to see a picture from each of you with your plant babies on graduation day as you're getting them transplanted and situated in the garden there. It's an exciting day. It is, they've made it through the grow lights, the beginning of the season, and through the hardening off process. They're graduating now into the garden. Absolutely something that I think we need to be celebrating there. So once you've done your graduation photo and sent it to me, because I want to be seeing those, all that we need to do is transplant them in. And so what we're going to do is basically measure out to where we're planting. And then we're going to dig a hole about 6 inches deep, grab 1 handful of worm castings, pop that into the bottom, plus a tablespoon of an organic fertilizer, such as our 444 superfood. Give that a little massage. Then go ahead, grab your plant baby, pop that in and backfill with the surrounding soil. And then as a top dressing right on the top of the soil, you're going to use 1 handful of worm castings and 1 tablespoon of 444 superfood. Massage that in with your hands, give it a good watering, and that plant baby is set up to thrive. It's got everything that it needs. It's going to be so happy there. And what now happens with this baby growing so well early on in the season, being hardened off, and now having kind of a fed soil environment to be moving into, is that over the course of the coming months, we're going to have all those beautiful leafy greens, the beautiful heads of cabbages, all sorts of tomatoes, and then a lot more on top of that. So this is just one of the many harvests that I had last season. And I literally followed the exact process that we went through today and utilized just those compost, just those worm castings, and just that organic fertilizer to ultimately arrive with really beautiful harvest there. So folks, that's everything that I wanted to cover off on today. Would absolutely love to open it up to see if there's any questions from Lori or from Elizabeth, Terry, and then we can wrap up from there. But yeah, any questions, please do share. All righty. Think we might be all set there. Anything before we wrap up, hop off here?
No, I don't think so. None here.
Beauty. Elizabeth, all good on your end?
Yeah, everything's
Awesome.
good.
Perfect. Well, I think that's everything here for today then, folks, but you know where to find me in the meantime. So if you have questions at any point as we go through the next little bit, just shoot me an email. And then, yeah, looking forward to getting growing with each of you this season.
I do have one question. What do you replenish the soil in your bed in the spring?
I just add 1 to 2 inches of compost onto the top of it.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I disturb the soil beneath as little as possible.
Ah,
Yeah, that's all I do, and then it is, yeah, I think it's just in perfect form for growing in. And with that being said, I'm always doing little like experiments and playing around with different ways of, I guess you could say, preparing the soil. But yeah, I like to establish a really nice soil, probably 75% compost, 25% vermiculite. And then after that, I add that 1 to 2 inches of compost onto the top, and we're off to the races.
wow. Okay.
Good question. Perfect.
And the superfood, is that available through buying the soil? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can either buy it on its own, or there is a patio transplant kit, which comes with 1 bag of worm castings and 1 bag of the superfood. And that would be like, that would cover 2 4-foot by 8 beds really, really well. And so any excess that you have, you could then be using as a top dressing about 6 weeks later into the season and be all good.
Yeah. Got lots of worm castings from the winter.
Love it. That's good. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So in that instance, you just buy the individual bag of superfood, and then you'd be all set there. If you do end up deciding to do that, send me an email beforehand, because I can probably find a way to scoot out to you and deliver it to you there, which would be a lot of fun to properly meet in person.
All right. Sounds good, George.
Perfect. Alrighty, folks. So I think that's all for today here. Feel free to flip through and email to me if you have any questions, or just leave a comment on any of our YouTube videos. And that's all. And I'll catch you all soon, okay?
Sounds good, Jordan.
Okay, take care. Bye.
For now.